Hey guys, my name is Brian. I also go by the Neuromancer or Neuromantic here on YouTube. I run an addiction and recovery blog called the Concrete Confessional Blog, and today I have wet hair, and I'm going to talk about what it feels like to be trapped in sort of the most severe, advanced stage of addiction, what can easily become what I call terminal addiction. The reason that I'm talking about this is because in my own life, I have torpedoed every area of my life with severe benzo and opioid addiction that has lasted for 20 years now, on and off. And in the course of losing or at least damaging seriously so many of my relationships with friends and family members and partners, had so many people look at this from the outside and tell me you have everything going for you. Why are you choosing to destroy your life? You're choosing to throw it all away. And what I hope you can understand a little bit better after you listen to this today is that when you are locked in that loop of severe, possibly terminal addiction, the illusion of choice is something that only exists for people outside of you. When you are locked in that loop and it gets really far along in addiction, it's not necessarily possible just to make the decision not to do what you're doing anymore. So I think the best way to understand that is to understand that advanced state of addiction is a kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder. And if you don't know anything about OCD, there are different forms of it. It often involves sort of intrusive thoughts about various topics. There's one, for instance, one type of OCD is contamination OCD, where you are preoccupied and obsessive about the cleanliness of what you take into your body and your environment. So maybe you compulsively wash your hands and your living quarters. Maybe you are constantly, going to the bathroom, to the extent that no one who is quote unquote normal would, to make sure that your hands and the rest of your body are clean. Maybe you have some weird restrictions about what you can eat and not eat and how you use the bathroom and things like that. But the hallmarks of OCD, one of the things is just this obsession, this severe obsession with whatever your sort of set of triggers is. In addiction, you see that too. When I tell you guys, the week before I would get my Xanax script filled, I would spend that whole week every month planning, okay, this is how I'm going to do it differently this time. This is how I'm going to split the number of pills I have over the course of a month so that I don't run out within 3 days, taking 90 pills within 3 days, and that's not an exaggeration. This is how I'm going to sort of take this more in a more measured way so that I don't end up humiliating myself and going on a binge and doing all these uncharacteristic, embarrassing, potentially dangerous things. This is how I'm going to do it this month. And I would take such pleasure in obsessing over it and thinking about how it was going to go. I would go to the pharmacy, fill my script, I would be on the bus, I would pop the first pill or two, and 2 minutes later, literally without thinking about it, my hand would be back in the pill jar and I would be taking out handfuls of these pills, literally taking handfuls of these pills. I'd wake up 2 or 3 days later having taken literally a month's worth of Xanax, maybe 90 milligrams of Xanax, which is a really high daily dose of 3 milligrams per day. I would have taken that in 3 days. I wouldn't remember a single thing, and it would be just this awful anxiety of oh my God, I run out of this, how I'm going to function without it now. And so that obsession plays a huge role in both OCD and addiction, and attached to that obsession is ritual. So for most of my opioid addiction, I've been an intravenous user of heroin and fentanyl. And I think what people don't understand, it's not just about getting the drug into your body efficiently. What I compare it to is it's kind of like the star quarterback who has his lucky sock and his special way to blow his nose before he runs out on the field. You get really weird about wanting to take your drug in your way and you fixate on that. So I'm not going to go too much into the details because I don't want to trigger anyone who is an addict who is listening to this. So I'm not going to talk about the way I had of arranging my paraphernalia and performing the injection procedure and things like that. But all I will say was I was as disciplined and orderly even when my life was a mess and I was so just urgent about getting this drug into my body. I was just as disciplined and methodical as any surgeon performing brain surgery would be. So there's that obsession in ritual, but shared by addiction and OCD. But most importantly is you get stuck in a loop. So going back to that example of contamination OCD, if one of your compulsions is washing your hands, in severe OCD, you will literally get stuck in that loop of, I have to wash my hands to clean them. People will wash their hands hundreds of times. It's so severe that you will call out to them. Maybe they're in the bathroom. You will call out to them and say, hey, what are you doing? We got to go to the mall. They might not even hear you. They have literally almost become robotic in performing that action to allay their anxiety. They've almost become robotic, and they get stuck in that loop until some external force, sort of yanks them out of that, or maybe their brain sort of burns that loop out for a moment and they get a little bit of respite. And that is severe addiction. You get stuck in this loop of this awful, just this feeling of impending doom, this totally disproportionate anxiety attached to what is going to happen if I don't get this substance in my bloodstream. You get obsessed about how much time you have left before you get sick, and you are just totally fixated on, do I have enough of it in my bloodstream? How do I get more? And if you're not sure that you're going to be able to keep yourself where you want to be, there is this tremendous anxiety. Again, it doesn't measure up to any real aspect of the situation. I know that language is a little vague, but what I mean is okay, worst case scenario, you're not going to get this drug into you. Yeah, withdrawal is awful, but you're going to feel the sickest you've ever felt for 3 days, maybe a week. You're going to feel lousy for a month, and then your whole life is going to be back on track. If you do the right thing and stay clean, you're going to have your life back. There is no rational decision making in severe addiction. No one on earth. There is no drug that feels good enough that it is worth throwing away all your relationships, all your future financial and professional prospects, permanently damaging your physical and mental health, and daily taking risks that mean that you could be gone any day. I've had severe overdoses from addiction. I've been in comas before. I have had, just withdrawal seizures from benzos. I've been so close to death from these things, and it never even fazed me because I was stuck in that loop. It was unthinkable to me. The obsession, the ritual, the anxiety attached to not taking more drugs was so severe that it was just, I was going to complete that circuit of panic, use, feel okay for a little while, panic, use, feel okay for a little while until I died, or until some external force, whether it was treatment or something else, just came into my life and removed me from that loop for long enough that maybe I could go through a detox program to where my mind and body didn't need that substance anymore, and I could reintroduce some kind of element of rationality and choice back into this situation. But when I tell you that people in that advanced state of addiction, guys, it's not fun anymore. Yeah, in the early stages of addiction, drugs can feel amazing, but by the time that you're in the advanced states of addiction that I'm talking about, like the severe terminal addiction, not fun anymore. It's the worst feeling in the world because you are just blowtorching your life. And so you're taking these drugs. For me, it was taking benzos and opioids in combination. If I was awake still, it wasn't enough because I couldn't live with myself for what I was doing to my life and to the people I loved. And so it didn't feel like enough until I was unconscious. Well, what happens when you take enough to make yourself unconscious? Well, if you're lucky enough that you don't die, you wake up. When you wake up, you're sick again. And you have to repeat this whole nightmare. And make no mistake, it is a waking nightmare. It is like having some dark stranger appear, at your side, hold a gun to your head and say, steal from your little brother, say, lie to your best friend, like burn your future prospects, just torch everything you've worked for your whole life. And it has that feeling of desperate urgency, these addictive commands. It is very much the feeling you would have if someone has a gun to your head, where you can't even think properly anymore. You can't plan, you can't weigh risks. It's this anxiety that is, again, it's just so overwhelming that it shuts down all of your executive decision-making faculties. In severe chronic addiction has been shown to damage, for example, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our cerebral cortex that allows us to weigh risks, to make long-term plans, to delay gratification. Like, these parts of your brain are structurally damaged by long-term addiction. And in the end, you end up stuck in that loop, just like you do in OCD, where you're using, just like a person with contamination OCD is cleaning their hands or cleaning their room or whatever. It's like you are stuck in that loop, and if some powerful external force doesn't pull you out of it, you are going to be stuck in it until you die. So the idea that you have choice in that advanced state of addiction, in my opinion, in my experience, is just not true. I understand how looking outside in, it is so frustrating. You think you could end this for all of us any day now. You could just choose to get better, And I understand how, in a certain sense, like that's true. But looking at the neuroscience of addiction and having felt that really advanced addictive state, like you can't. You can't just stop it. You can't just choose, till you can get your brain body weaned off of those powerful drugs that all of your systems have learned to function on. You don't feel right at all without it. Life isn't doable without it. Until you can get back to some kind of biochemical baseline, at least somewhere closer to a healthy baseline, you've got essentially no chance at recovery. So what that means is that sometimes there needs to be intervention. Sometimes people need to go through the court system. It's just a myth that you need to want it for yourself, that you have to choose recovery. A lot of people who I know who are sober and clean for long periods of time now were people who were forced into treatment. But you know what happens? In the beginning, you're forced to do it. At some point, you get the choice back. You look back at the waking nightmare of active addiction and you just choose, I'm not going to do that to myself anymore. No drug is worth that, And again, as strongly pleasurable as these substances can be, none of them are worth what you do to your life as a severe addict. None of them are worth it. And beyond that, you're not even experiencing that pleasure at the end of the process. You're barely feeling it at the end because you have so much tolerance, and your physical and mental health have been compromised so much, you just can't get the feel good effect anymore, no matter how much you have. And it becomes a true like capital H hell. Severe addiction is living capital H hell, like here during our time on earth. And I understand the frustration that comes from loving someone and wanting them so badly to get better. But the only advice I can give you is, there's this talk by Johan Hari. He's a British journalist with a lot of addiction in his family. He went all over, talked to the experts on addiction, and he gave this amazing TED talk, and it's called Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong. And he's approaching addiction not only from a neuroscientific perspective, but also from a social perspective. So he's approaching this from one of his taglines that I absolutely love is that the opposite of addiction is not being clean. It's not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Because in so many ways, in advanced addiction, we are so isolated, we are so lonely and anxious, we are relying on chemicals to give us those positive feelings that we should be getting from having purpose in the world, from having meaningful relationships, friendships, family, romantic relationships. Like, we've transferred all of those functions over to a substance that, again, is giving us diminishing yields, and it will only ever give us less and less as it takes more and more. So we get trapped, and just continuing to love that severe addict can make the difference. It's necessary to set boundaries. I understand that, but I do not believe in cutting severe addicts out of your life. I believe in loving that person, again, with healthy boundaries attached to that, whatever that looks like in your situation. I believe in telling that person that you love them and you want them in their life, in your life, no matter what, until they are either better or they are not here anymore. And if they are in that latter group, and I have had, at least 10 friends, like real friends who are not here anymore, at least, in the end, I loved them. They had that at the end, as awful as that state that they were in was, they knew that they were loved and valued and that there were open arms waiting for them if they could come back from this. And I understand addicts leave trail of dead bodies and chaos everywhere. There's a reason why there's so much stigma attached to addiction, and it's not just ignorance. We cause so much damage. We're impulsive. We can be violent. We can be dishonest. No one is a better liar than an advanced addict, because we will say anything to get more of the drug. We will say anything to prevent anyone from threatening our continued supply of that high. So I understand how awful that is to go through and to see, it's almost like someone that you love is possessed. I totally get that, but I think that that is the love till it hurts thing. And in the end, if you're in that group of people who ends up losing the person that they love to addiction, I think that has to be the greatest consolation, to know you love them until the end. Until the end, that addict knew that, they had, again, open arms waiting for them, to come back to. So I have really intense feelings about this. I don't want to prattle on forever, but I hope that something that I've said in this video will help you to understand the addict in your life a little bit better. I'm really curious to see if you're listening to this and you're someone who has had experience with addiction at whatever level of severity, if this resonates with you, if you have another way that you think is better to explain it, and if you do, please share in the comments below. One final thing I'd like to note is that comparison of OCD and addiction is not it's not something that I thought of and pulled out of thin air. The reason that I started using that comparison all the time on my blog when I was trying to explain addiction for people who don't understand it from a neuroscientific perspective is because there are some revolutionary treatments for severe OCD that involve wiring up some of the areas of your brain that are sort of rewired by OCD. You actually put basically electrodes into a couple affected areas of the brain, and you stimulate them in such a way that you reverse some of the changes that have happened through OCD of increasing severity, and those same methods have been proven to be successful for addicts. So this neurological overlap that I'm talking about is not theoretical. It's something that's borne out by the fact that some of the treatments for OCD, again, at the level of actual intervention into the damaged brain, those are the same for the two disorders. So I have another video coming up about those scientific breakthroughs that have to do with placing electrodes in, for example, parts of the midbrain that addiction heavily influences, those midbrain reward centers, the nucleus accumbens, and the locus ceruleus. So I will release that probably next week. And if you like this kind of content and you want to hear more, I would really appreciate it if you liked, subscribed, and stuck around. So my hair is almost dry. I think I'm ready to end this video, and I will see you guys all next time.